on. All right. Good evening, guys. Welcome to our 10th episode of the Racing Line podcast. Gents, we've made it to 10. We've already lost Joseph tonight in hysterics, but tonight we're going to be reviewing the last race of the MotoGP season that took place last night in Valencia. Boys, how did we find it? How are we all doing?
Good, mate. Thank you.
Thanks.
How are
Good to
you?
be back, guys.
Yep, Tonso's back.
How's the tonsils, mate?
So
That's it, bro.
there you go. Got a name.
Tonso, mate.
Did you give him a gentle week?
I did. I stayed off the hard beverages and didn't yell in class at all. So should be
Lots of
ready to go.
voice care. Lots of voice care.
A lot of voice care. That's the
Lemon
way.
juice gargles.
Yeah, that's it. So much lemon.
All
juice.
right. Mixie, since it's MotoGP, let's hear your recap, mate.
Yeah, look, I think the last race of the season, it's always a interesting race when, despite the fact that the championship is wrapped up, I think the race had a bit of everything. Starting off, I think Martin was brilliant off the jump. He led most of the first half of the race. And he did well to keep Bagnaia behind him. Was quite a strong start from Ducati, but also from Suzuki. I think that the first part of the race, the early laps, was a bit of a battle between the two factory Suzukis and the Ducatis up front. I wasn't surprised by that, to be honest, because Suzuki have been strong at Valencia for the last 2 or 3 years or so. And it's actually a track that Alex Rins does quite well at historically. So that didn't surprise me. There was a bit of back and forth to begin with there. And then, Rins once again, highly disappointing. 5th time this year that he's crashed out from a position of strength in the race. I think it was the 3rd time or 4th time this year he's crashed out from a podium position as well. So just highly disappointing from Alex Rins in a season that I think, we would all agree on has been highly disappointing for him, considering the expectations heading into this season for him. I think it's been very underwhelming. So very disappointing again to see him crash out. And I think that just completely ruined the tussle between Ducati and Suzuki for the rest of the race. It became a Ducati show. We saw Bagnaia take over Martin about halfway through the race, and then it really was just smooth sailing for him. He's been quite elite since about halfway through the season. He, if buts and maybes, but again, if he doesn't come off at Misano, considering Quartararo couldn't finish last race, I just think it would have been a fantastic showdown to finish the race at Valencia. Obviously, that didn't happen, but amazing storyline for Pecco, and I think it just sets up 2022 so nicely, and just ominous signs from Ducati. Really ominous signs. Again, Martin does really well to stay second, finishes second. There's a late charge from Miller, who was quite consistent, I'd say, throughout the race. He fell back towards the mid-race, but came back strong to claim the last position on the podium. So Ducati 1, 2, 3 for the podium lockout, the 3rd time in their history in the Premier class. So quite impressive. Quartararo finishing in 5th behind Joan Mir, who I think had quite a strong race. He did his best on the package that he had. Finishing 4th is very Mir-esque, to say the least. He's always been consistent, but just hasn't had any killer in him at all. This season, I don't think he could do much. And then Zarco, Binder, Bastianini ran out the top 8, and then and as well we have the 9-time retiring world champion in Valentino Rossi finishing in 10th. So a fabulous season of MotoGP. Again, congratulations to Fabio Quartararo for winning the world championship. And I think it's been a very, very enjoyable season as a spectator.
Thanks, Mike. I just you did draw a little bit of attention to it, but man, Rossi, what a career! I think what is it, 26 years or something like that?
Yeah.
The man's got 89 Premier Class victories, 115 across all 3 classes, like 199 podiums in the Premier Class, 432 Grand Prix. That's the stat that I found amazing. 430. How many races in a season?
18.
18, 19.
That is nuts. So I think that guy, you got people in Formula One that see him as their ultimate hero, like Lando Norris. His whole helmet design is based on Rossi's. I think it's just, I think we just need to draw attention to the fact that that man is finally finishing up.
I thought it was really nice this weekend with all the VR46 riders actually just paying him a bit of tribute and respect. Like I never really thought about it that much until I've thought about it a little bit, but not like as much as they made it evident this week on how much he has shaped their careers and is part of their being molded into the sport. So I really thought that was very nice, especially with the tribute helmets, and even last week or 2 weeks ago when his half brother was running the Valet liveries at in Misano. So yeah,
Grazie Vale.
Yeah, grazie Vale.
Grazie Vale liveries.
It was very nice. It was very nice.
Yeah, I think we'll get into it later, but it's like you're saying, Harry, it's an amazing career and changed the sport in a lot of ways. So we'll get into it later, but
it's going to be interesting.
Amazing career.
It's going to be interesting who can sort of pick up, or who will be then in terms of who will pick up where he left off in terms of like that character at the track. Because looking at it now, I think that the sport has changed in a way where being a character is not that you can't be a character, but it's so much more corporate. It's so much more, you're dealing with sponsors and stuff that we might not ever see a character like that again.
And why is that? Because it's totally different in Formula One, whereas they're encouraging that.
Well, Formula One was how MotoGP was like 3-4 years ago, till Liberty Media bought them out. I feel like the new documentary series they're doing this year might sort of help start changing the way we perceive the riders, just like Drive to Survive sort of changed the way that the normal world looked at the F1 paddock. So we'll see what happens.
Are you joking?
I think there is a lot of personality in MotoGP. If I'm being honest, like I feel like fair enough. You might not have the fireworks that you see, but I feel in F1, but I do feel like there's obviously massive respect between the riders, but there's always drama. Like, I mean, how many times have we seen riders losing it after incidences this year, and especially last year? I mean, there were about 4 or 5 incidences last year where you had riders so pissed at one another. I mean, I'm just thinking of Austria as an example. Like there were like 2 or 3 incidences in Austria 1 last year. There was that crazy crash with Morbidelli and Zarco.
Uncle Jack and Mir are always having drama.
Well, yeah, you could see there's a bit of a running tension there, but like again, massive respect between everyone. But I wouldn't say that it's completely, it's tame or anything. I feel like there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of young riders too. I mean, like there's a whole new era beginning now in MotoGP that is only going to get better. You've got 3 established, I would say, superstars in Quartararo, Pecco, you could say Mir. Obviously, Marquez is right up there. So you got the established stars, and then look at this crop of young talent that's ready to burst onto the scene next year. So I think MotoGP is set up really well for that kind of drama and fireworks, if you want to say. I think there's only good things to come in.
Beauty of MotoGP is that things happen on track, and that is not something that can be said in Formula One all the time. So I don't think it's necessarily as dependent on creating the storylines, because the racing facilitates more action in and of itself. But let's try, like, fantastic career for Valentino Rossi. To think that he's been in the sport literally for as long as we've been able to think about the sport. And if you think about the amount of people that he's gone up against over our lives, it's an insane career. What about some of the talking points from the race, boys? What were your thoughts when you watched the race? Do you want me to begin?
Yeah, you begin. I'm interested to hear your take.
All right. So
you've ruffled my feathers.
So this is a very considered take. All right, that's how I want to start. This is not a Miller hate take. I'm not trying to be antagonistic for the sake of it. But I was thinking about this yesterday, right? So, and Joe, you can vouch for this. I came into this year very much with a new outlook on Thriller Miller, right? I listened to his podcast in the off season with the Gypsy Tales. I thought this guy doesn't sound like a bad guy. Let me give him a bit of a break, right? He came into the season, started pretty well.
See how you even just said he's not a bad guy. Why would you
Let
think
him
to
finish.
begin with he was a bad
Let him
guy?
finish, Joe.
Why?
You
Because-
Miller train.
All right,
Because I'm like the ambassador for corporate motorsport in general. I don't like mullets. I don't like, birdies. I'm
You don't like
corporate-
personality.
Yes,
You're a bit of a wanker.
I like helmets that are, emblazoned with logos of sponsors.
He likes
That's me.
Reds.
Anyway, so I'm thinking about Jack Miller and I'm watching the race yesterday, right? He had a great race by his standards, but making a lot of mistakes. And I think if you were to characterize Jack Miller in a couple of words, very quick, but makes a lot of mistakes. Yeah. When you look at some of these people that he's racing against, Bagnaia, particularly Mir, right? Mir yesterday, the amount of class that he showed to be in a bike that was really nowhere near the performance level of the Ducati. Okay. Create just steady laps continually, not making any mistakes. I feel like Jack Miller, because of his jump straight from Moto3 to MotoGP, lacks a little bit of the finesse of the people that he's racing against now. Okay. And the reason for that is if you're someone that's raced in Moto, a lot of these people that, we're talking about now raced in Moto2, were racing at the front of the grids in Moto2, okay, where they had the chance to actually run races from the front to, establish, rhythms in races and not have to always be chasing. So they're a lot more practiced and a lot more well-versed in that particular skill. Whereas I feel like wherever Miller is in that front pack, he's making a lot of mistakes. He overshoots the braking mark. When he raced Alex Marquez last week, took over him, overshot the next braking point, got overtaken again. Next lap, took over him, overshot the braking point, got overtaken again the next lap. Right? I feel like he lacks the finesse because he hasn't been put into a position where he can lead races, where he can, be at the front of the pack and learn how to manage that particular scenario. And even when he was racing for Honda and racing for the satellite Ducati teams, he really didn't have that opportunity because he was either mired in the midfield, and when he was occasionally at the front, not a whole lot was expected of him. What say you to that?
I think you're talking bullshit, eh? 'Cause
Really?
I'm gonna tell you why. Because you mentioned it. You just said he hasn't raced in Moto2, and that's where you base these theories from. And then you talk about Alex Marquez, who's the Moto2 champion, and I would say Alex Marquez isn't as good as Jack Miller and hasn't shown anything that Jack Miller has shown, and they're about the same age. And
He's
then
won 2 championships.
okay, but we're talking about big boy racing now. We're talking about the MotoGP, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
And then you're going to talk about who's another Moto2 champion that you loved when he came in. What's his name?
Oh, fire up, son.
Can I
I love
ask
it.
you?
Why
I'm here for it.
Remember Alex Rins on the ponds? Oh, Alex Rins, he's so good. He's going to do such good things for Suzuki. Guy falls off every 2 races. You don't say nothing about Alex Rins. We know he falls.
I say Alex
think
Rins
we've
has
said a lot
lost the
about
job.
Alex
Listen. Jack had a good race yesterday, and he made 1 or 2 mistakes at the start of the race. And you know what? I'm not going to defend him for that. But I feel like the way he came back in that second half of the race, and he came back and he passed Quartararo and he passed me. Yes, he came back.
I don't think he came back. I mean, he talked after the race and said he was saving the tires, and then he said that when he tried to go for 1 lap, he overcooked them in 1 lap and he couldn't go anymore. So, look, I think I'll let you finish, Joe, and then I'll throw my 2 cents in and keep going.
I just think Anthony has a way of he's overthinking it. Every year that Jack
I don't
Miller's
overthink it.
I'm gonna tell you, every year he's been in MotoGP, he's got more points and got more points, and he's done it again, and he's done it again, and he's done it again.
Can I throw a few stats at you, please? Just for
Throw me some stats.
2015.
Yes.
Jack Miller's first season in the MotoGP. Fair enough, first year. He was racing with Cal Crutchlow.
Yeah.
Cal Crutchlow finishes 8th. He finishes 19th.
You
First
can't-
year
you can't- you
on an
can't talk about that.
inferior bike.
You can't talk about that.
Okay?
He was on the
Inferior
worst
bike. He was racing against Loris Baz on a Ford Yamaha, another inferior bike, who doubled his points almost. Hector Barbera, Yoni Hernandez, Scott Redding, all ahead of him.
Not rookies.
2016,
Come on, keep going.
Jack Miller.
Yeah.
18th.
Yeah.
57 points.
Yeah.
He's racing with Eugene Laverty. Finishes 13th.
Yeah.
2017. Where is he? Jack Miller. Oh, finishes in 11th. His
Who's his
teammate, Petrucci, finishes in 8th with almost 40 points more. 2018. Jack Miller finishes in 13th on Pramac Ducati. His teammate, Daniele Petrucci, finishes in 8th. 2019. Jack Miller finishes in 8th. Daniele Petrucci finishes in 6th. 2020, he finally wins his first teammate battle.
And when was this?
In 6 years. He's won one teammate battle in 6 years.
And when was the first?
But he's
year
a
that
great
he got,
racer. He's a great racer.
When was the first year he got the updated bike, you knob?
Look,
People
I'll
that
say
he's
this.
racing
I'll
against
say
didn't
this
have the
before
updated
Joseph,
bikes as well.
before Joseph goes, to cardiac arrest. I completely agree with Anthony, and I don't say it.
We know you
because
do.
We
He
know
seems
you
he seems
do.
to think, because Harry and Joseph seem to think that I'm all in against Miller. No, I'm not. I'll say this. I agree with Anthony because having watched Miller for a number of years now, okay, and wanting him to succeed, despite what you might think, wanting him to succeed, he honestly should never have been a works rider. And I understand that there was no real other option for Ducati. I still think personally they should have gone with Zarco this year, and they should have put him on a one year prove it deal, but they didn't. They decided to go with Miller and give him a chance. Fair enough. Okay. But if anything, this year shows that Ducati is by far a more superior package than it's ever been in the last 3 to 4 years. It's a far superior package. It has put the Yamaha to shame in the second half of the season. Yamaha hasn't even been able to go with them bar 1 or 2 races, but Ducati has been consistent at tracks that it was, I mean, look at Valencia. Last year, they could not touch Suzuki in race 1. Miller had a great race in Valencia 2 last year. He had a great battle with Morbidelli, but overall, Ducati as a whole were useless. A lot of these tracks in the second half of the season last year, they've been unbelievably consistent and unbelievably fast at tracks that they've struggled to turn at in the second half of the season. So their package, it's not a question of their package. They've been excellent since testing. Okay. There was a lot of talk pre-season about how Ducati's bike was so much more improved. They've obviously got killer pace. No one can touch them on straights, but their handling has been fantastic. Their tire consumption has been great. So if there was any year where I thought Miller had a great chance to really make a name for himself in the sense of challenging for a championship, it should have been this year. And I think that there were flashes when he showed that he could be up there, but I think overall he's been underwhelming. You can't say that he's been overly consistent too, because it's not like he's been churning out low podiums or staying where he needs to be in order to be second, third in the championship. He's been irregular
because he makes mistakes, Michael, because he does make mistakes.
And you're comparing him to Rins. Yes, Alex Rins has fallen far too much in the last 2 seasons. Prior to that, falling wasn't really a thing, and in Moto2 falling wasn't a thing. So I personally don't understand where the fallings come from. There might be too much pressure on him, but I'll say this: when Alex Rins is at his best, he is a far better racer than Jack Miller. When they're both at their best, Alex Rins can do things on that Suzuki that he shouldn't be able to. And even at the start of that race yesterday, it's obvious that Suzuki's package this year has been nowhere near where it needs to be. The handling is still there, but pace-wise, and even the way that they have been using their tires because they've been chasing the races too much. I mean, this is probably the first week all season Suzuki actually qualified half decently, and didn't have to use most of their tires just to catch up to the leading pack. So I think, as I was saying, I think when Rins is at his best and Miller's at his best, it's not even really close for me. But I think Jack Miller, he will never be for me a tier 1 Ducati rider. I think he's better when the pressure isn't there so much, so to speak. Sometimes he can rise to the occasion, but I think all in all, for me anyway, I don't think he hasn't got what it takes to be a world champion. That's just how I see it.
I think he does.
Anthony,
I
enough
don't
for you.
think that. I
Go
don't
Harry.
think so
Go
at all.
Harry. Go
I-
Harry.
From a newbie's perspective, I think he's on the best bike. From what I can see, he's on the best bike. His teammate is smashing him every week, and I'm a Miller fan just because he's an Aussie. I support the Aussies, right?
Because there's no Greeks in the field, eh?
Yeah, that's right. We're not really good at much. But
There's so many Maltese in the MotoGP. Anyway, sorry.
best bike. Yes, he's had a couple of wins this year, but he's consistently being outperformed by Bagnaia. And as I said, I'm a fan, but I just can't see he is really inconsistent. Like even last night's race, got off the line really well, fell back and fought his way through. Now, I know we said this before the podcast, but he seems to me like he's the Bottas of Ducati. And I know Joey doesn't like that comparison. But
He's settle.
He's not
Settle,
the.
son.
Okay, keep going, Harry.
for me, that's how he looks because Bottas is really inconsistent.
Let me throw another
No,
thought out there.
I want to talk a bit before.
Hold
you
it, because
go-
you
no.
before you
no,
drop
give
another
me a
F
sec-
bomb on me.
No, give me
let
a
me just,
second.
let me just
No,
throw.
I love it. I love it. Let's go.
I need to say a few
Yeah,
things.
let him say his piece,
Listen,
Anthony, 'cause
listen.
it's very easily refutable.
Yeah, it's refutable. I never said he was better than Bagnaia, and it's impossible to sort of refute that because Bagnaia's had an amazing season. But you were saying that you think it's because he wasn't in Moto2 that he's so far behind. That's what you
No,
said.
I said I don't think that
No,
he's
Anthony
had,
said that, Mike, not you.
I said I don't think he's had the experience of racing of racing up front and managing races from the front that you get in Moto2. Because if you're the best in Moto2, you move to MotoGP.
If at the start of the year you said Ducati's going to win the team's championship, constructors championship, he's going to come fourth in the season and win 2 races, get 4 podiums, you would have thought that's a good season. If at the start of the season someone said that, you'd have thought that was a great season.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a good season for Miller, but I think it's been a great season.
It's been a good season.
There are two things. There are two things here, right? At the start of the year, Miller was touted as being the number 1 rider for Ducati, and it wasn't even a question. Right?
Changed his nickname on his leathers to Thriller.
He had a fantastic, or not even a fantastic. He had a good end to the season last year. He had good momentum. Like I said, he won Valencia 2. He finished on a podium in the final race of the season at Portimao. The hype was real. Okay, Bagnaia tested better than him at Losail during all preseason. Okay, all preseason. During the race, the first race, all right, Miller had that incident with Mir that you lost your head about, that I maintained to this day was immature from both riders, but I think that little brain fart is the kind of thing that has cost him in races. Like even at Misano, yeah, fair enough, Bagnaia falls. Why is Miller falling? Okay, like that. Yes, that's very Rins-esque, but like they're the kind of things. You're on the best bike. Clearly, you're on the best bike. They've just won the constructors. It's not even, for me, it's not even a question. Okay, I just don't think with the pressure of being on a factory ride, clearly there's pressure at Ducati because they will remove people like that. You've got a whole stable coming through, so I get that. But I just think when he was on Pramac, there was less pressure and aggression. I don't ever think he's going to challenge for a championship. I just don't see it. I really don't see it. And also your claim about whoever's talking about not needing to be successful in Moto2. Last year's world champion was very ordinary in Moto2, made the jump from Moto3, and in 2 years was champion of MotoGP. Yes, it was a strange year last year, but he's very, very consistent, Joan Mir. So I don't really agree with that claim.
And Quartararo wasn't particularly amazing in Moto2 either, to be honest.
Can I just point out that Michael's passion only arcs up on this podcast when he's talking about Jack Miller?
No, I really feel like, and I've said this for years now, I just feel like we can, being Australian, we overhype him a lot. And also we haven't mentioned that another Australian has won the Moto2 World Championship. So big props to Remy Gardner
I
for
don't-
you on
that
that-
Moto 2
I
championship.
did
Are you on
some-
that bandwagon, mate? Or are
Because
you?
he's a
Definitely.
he's a KTM rider, and that's Michael's
see-
favorite team.
I see Remy Gardner being very legitimate in MotoGP, but
He won't win a
given
MotoGP.
the talent level that's coming
This
through,
guy.
you never know what's going to happen.
So I
Look
think
at-
it's Anthony
look
that's
at-
got the
Look
Aussie
at this
hate.
guy. Can I tell you, he just said if you win Moto 2, you come into
I
MotoGP
said no.
better than if you don't. And
I still think he's better than Miller, but I think that I don't know if he's got. I think his teammate was better than him this year. Really, he just didn't get the jump. But can I just finish my point, please,
I do
before we
think
move
he'll be
on?
better than
Please,
Miller, though.
can I finish
This
my
guy.
point? I
This
never
guy.
said I think that Miller can be a champion.
I
I think
think
that he's got. Just let me finish, man. I think he's got the talent to do it. Genuinely, he's got the speed. The problem that he has, right now, is he doesn't have the consistency. You say that he had a great comeback, fantastic. But if you're going to win these races in MotoGP, you can't stuff up at the beginning to need to have the comeback, and that's where he needs to get to. He needs to be able to dominate a race and like look at Johan Mir. Okay, no
They keep
mistakes.
changing the pronunciations of names so much. Like,
Johan.
where did Johan come from? He's all of a sudden a
Isn't it
speed.
Joan?
Don't know
Johan.
about me.
Joan.
Anyway,
Mire.
but he needs to get that
Johan.
level of consistency that he obviously doesn't have right now. And if he gets that, and he does obviously have the speed, I think he can. But at this stage, he doesn't have it.
Did he?
How old
And
is
I
he?
think
Did he do the job that he was meant to do this year?
Mate, we're not
I think
talking about.
I think he
did
has.
do the
I
job.
think he's definitely done a job to an extent. I just don't think that he's lived up to his own hype. Like,
The fact
if you're
that he
coming
lost
in
to
as
it.
the number one, he lost the number one preference, I believe, after 3 rounds. If
That's,
that.
can I say something as well about this? 'Cause I've mentioned this before. I don't think he even ever had the number one preference because I
No,
said
it
this.
was
He
very clear.
he
It was
only had
very
a
clear.
1-year contract.
If
Who
you
offers-
go
who
and,
gave-
if you go and watch Ducati's pre-season hype video, which went for about half an hour, they very clearly talk about giving him the opportunity to be a number one rider. And Pecco, who had a junk year last year, again, who could not stay on
Pecco
the
got in by
bike,
default. Let's be
was-
honest. Pecco got into the factory
and
team
he
by
seized
default.
he seized his chance. He seized his opportunity. And he's like, look how consistent he's been. That's why I can't stand this claim that we're being too harsh on Miller. The package is there. The package is there. It's not even close.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yamaha's been nowhere to be seen. Fair enough. He's won the world championship, but the second half of the season, Ducati have been untouchable. So I don't buy this. I don't buy the whole argument.
Well,
that
Mick,
we're
that's
too harsh on Miller.
That's a good point that you made. That allows us to segue from this conversation before it gets any more atomic.
I say one more
Um,
thing. Just one more thing. I just remembered now. Very quick.
Yeah.
Because Michael said he'd rather have put Zarco on the bike. Zarco has the same bike, and he finished behind him in the championship. Zarco's been nowhere the second
I
half of the
understand
year.
that. I just think that Zarco is a bit more mature. Maybe being on having that factory pressure
He's 5 years older.
may have not affected him as much. And I think staying at Pramac without that factory pressure we could have maybe seen on the same bike Jack elevate to even more consistent, even greater levels. But it's all if buts and maybes.
I'm looking
How
forward
old's
to
the
next year.
fella?
26 or 27.
Oh, okay. He's got
26?
lots of time.
Is he 26?
I don't think he's got time. And
I don't think he's got much
we have
time.
to talk about that. But
These
I
young
think given the
young
talent
boys
in
are
that
coming
Ducati
in.
stable, I don't think he's got much time at all.
He'll get a ride somewhere though.
Yeah, but he won't get a factory ride. I don't think if he loses this one.
I honestly
Except
think
maybe
if
at
Miller
Honda.
was to go back to a satellite team, you'd see him.
He's racing
raise
for
his game.
Suzuki. In
Would you take
I
him
don't
to
think-
Honda,
I don't-
Anthony?
I don't think he'll ever
pardon?
race for Suzuki.
Would you take him at Honda over Pole?
Me?
Mm,
I already know who I want at Honda.
okay,
after
that's
Paul's
not my
gone.
question.
No,
Who would you want? Alex
Who
Rins?
do you want? Alex
I want
Rins?
Johan Mir.
I don't think Johan Mir.
Nah.
I don't think.
I
Mir,
want Joan of Arc.
I don't think Mir will ever. I don't think Mir will leave Suzuki, and I have 2 reasons for that. I think if you listen to both of them talk, but I don't think Rins has a choice anymore. I think it's all dependent on how he starts next year. But they have a very strong the Suzuki family, given that it's such a small family, is a very tight knit group. I think this year was very testing because of the fact I think there was a bit of naivety at the end of last year in terms of how much they thought they were ahead of the rest of the group. I always go back to testing where they didn't test for this year's parts; they were testing for next year, which I think will be interesting given how much improved their whole shot device is now that they've raced with the 2022 whole shot in the last 2 races. They've been much better, but anyway, that's another thing for another day. I just think that with Mir, he's made it very clear how loyal he is to Suzuki. If they can get a good package back under him next year where he's challenging again, I think that will keep him there. The interesting thing for me is Alex Rins, and you're saying you're interested to see who goes to Honda. If Alex Rins was to go to Honda, that's something that I'd like to see as well, because I think given the way he rides, given the way Alex Rins rides, which is, much more, I'd say, risky.
He's more flamboyant,
aggressive.
It would be very interesting. I think about Marquez and Rins as a partnership. That's a very tasty proposition to me. But
I've always wanted to see what a mix of Rins and Mir looks like, because I would bet my bottom dollar that on 1 lap pace, Rins is probably would be on any bike probably one of the fastest riders on the grid, because he's so aggressive.
Well, if you look
but
at
he just
Rins
always
last year,
bins the bike.
if you look at Rins last year, the amount of times he set fastest laps during races in multiple tracks, fastest laps during races, and can't for the life of him, both of them actually struggle, but Suzuki struggle as a factory to set good qualifying times. They can't set hot laps, and if they improved that, they'd be challenging for not just podiums, wins every race, because we see them charge through the pack every single race. They just qualified closer to the front row, for most tracks.
How good were they
Take
this
away
week?
so much of it. Sorry,
with that I said, how much difference does that new whole shot device do for them?
I think the biggest change I saw was actually when I watched last week's race, going down the main straight at Portimao, which, next to the Ducatis, I found it very interesting to see how it affected them coming out of that back parabolic corner. Last year, they were getting burnt, even at the start of this year. If you remember, I think it was race 1 or 2, when Bagnaia was having at Portimao, when they raced there earlier this year, Bagnaia and Rins were having a bit of a duel early in the race before Rins came off, and the Suzuki just could not go with the Ducati. Last week, with this new whole shot at the start of the race, but also going down the straight, Suzuki had much more horsepower. So I think that's very interesting heading into next year. But anyway, I don't want to monologue too much, but it could be very, very interesting to see how Rins starts next year and what the future holds for Suzuki there.
Can I ask, I posed the question last week, and Michael's here this week, and you guys did answer it, but I'm coming back to it. If Pecco didn't fall off at the race where Quartararo won the championship, would he have still won it?
I worked it out for you this week.
Yep.
Quartararo won by 27 points, so it wouldn't have changed anything.
So if Pecco didn't fall off and won the last 2 races,
just would have been closer.
Okay.
That shows how good Quartararo's start of the season was.
That's when you said who's the love child of Rins and Mir, it's Quartararo.
Yeah, but
that's who it is. Someone who can be absolutely dominatingly quick, but also consistent.
Can I say something? Last year he was blind. He was amazing for the first half of the year, and then he fell away. And now this year I don't know if this is bike related or him. I'm guessing it's bike related. He was amazing for 3/4 of this year, half the year, but 3/4 of the year. And I don't know if it's to do with bike, like the upgrades to the Ducati and the Suzuki and even the Honda a bit. But I would say, like, from the eye test, that Yamaha went from looking like the best bike this year with him on it to easily looking like the 3rd or 4th best bike.
I said this 2 weeks ago, boys. I
didn't think we had enough races to make a big enough decision, but now it looks pretty ominous.
If you think
I've got a few things that I feel Joseph's just raised that are quite interesting.
If you think about Yamaha in their recent history, just in general, mate, when Maverick Vinales first signed with Yamaha, they started the season, like a bat out of hell. And then over the course of the year, he slowly lost traction, and Marquez ended up winning the championship.
That's a Maverick thing, not a Yamaha thing.
But the same thing happened last year with Quartararo. obviously, I think they take advantage of at the beginning of the season. They are always very strong at Losail. Obviously, Ducati's pulled that back a little bit as well now, but they're always strong to start the year. And then I also think you've got to take into consideration the fact that last year was a bit of an anomaly in general. Like people were still getting their feet. Look who ended up winning the championship. Johan Cruyff, Johan Mir ended up winning the championship from pure consistency. And I think the same thing's happening again this year. If we saw Bagnaia and Marquez racing for the whole year at the level they're at, or even if Mir was able, if Suzuki was able to get on top of their bike much earlier in the year, I'm very confident in saying that Quartararo wouldn't have won this championship.
I agree, and I'll say this: I don't think it can be underplayed how much the drama with Vinales affected Yamaha later in the season. Quartararo kept his head, but I think the team suffered because of that. And I mean, Morbidelli hasn't really been there, but I think Ducati, since that drama, their bike has been pretty much untouchable. And that's when we really started seeing Bagnaia move into the championship race. I also think what Anthony touched upon earlier is true. The first half of the season tend to be Yamaha tracks. And as we move towards the back end, in the last 2 years, Suzuki has got much stronger. Ducati has seemed to be pretty consistent over all the tracks this year, which is why I think they're deserved constructor championship winners
and teams champions.
Yeah, I think also it can't be understated how little the Suzukis this year, how much they had changed until these last 3 or 4 races. They actually had hardly changed the bike at all. Again, that whole shot device has completely changed not only their speed, but they've also had improved tyre wear again. Mir faded at the end of this last race, but was doing a pretty good job keeping up with those Ducatis. But
do you have a clause in your contract to just mention Suzuki as many times in a podcast as possible?
No, I'm just being objective here.
Primary sponsor of Michael Barger, X-Star.
I don't think I've favoured Suzuki at all this year. I've been very critical of them. But I think that it can't be understated as to how underdeveloped their bike was in the first 3 quarters of the season. And that's why I'm saying next year it's going to be, I think, a much closer race between all 3, with Honda coming back into the mix as well. So it's set up nicely for 2022.
Next year looks like the year. And what we also need to establish at the end of this year, just moving into next year, quite important. So, Joseph, you're going to be defending Ducati to the hilt. You've been doing that quite vehemently all season.
I think they've had a great season. If you're averaging 24 points a race as a team, that's pretty good. Like that's the reason I defend them. Like if they weren't doing that, I wouldn't.
I was making a joke. It's all good.
It can't be understated too how many Ducatis will be in the paddock next year. I mean, 8 bikes. Yeah, I mean that's
ballistic.
But that's
crazy to think about.
That's an investment that they're making. Like other teams can give bikes away. Yamaha don't want to give bikes away. Suzuki don't want to have a feeder team.
Suzuki's biggest. I keep saying to the fact that Mir is 3rd in the championship and Suzuki even have a sniff to be in the top 3 for constructors actually is all down. I would say mostly down to Joan Mir because of how consistent he's been. Considering how many times Rins has binned the bike this year, it's pretty amazing that they're finishing where they are with the bike that they had. And I think what's letting Suzuki down is not just time in qualifying and the fact that they had an underdeveloped bike this season. They need a satellite team. They really need a satellite team.
You weren't here last week, but that's
the landscape of MotoGP. If they actually invest, and yes, they're the smallest Japanese manufacturer in the paddock. I get that, but they were talking about it at the start of last year. They still haven't made a decision. Losing Brivio, I think, affected them, but they definitely need a satellite team.
You are sponsored by Suzuki.
They definitely.
I was trying to make a joke. I was trying to make a joke and say that Joseph's been defending Ducati. You've been defending Suzuki. I wanted to see if Harry has found himself barracking for a particular team or rider moving into 2022, so that we can
I like the Ducatis just because I think they're the best bike at this point. I don't really like.
What a bandwagoner!
Yeah. Oh,
what a mercenary!
Jump on that KTM train, Harry.
Yeah, well, Remy's going there next year, isn't he? So
Yeah.
that could be an option. Yeah.
They got four good bikes. I think they'll make a big jump again next year.
Look,
Next year is going to be amazing.
If
Amazing.
I have to support an Aussie, and the Miller hate on this podcast is making me kind of cynical of him. I think we're I think we might be on the Gardner train next year.
I love how midweek Harry's even jumping on the. Oh, he sounds like a bit of a bogan.
Mate,
Poor
I
man,
listened
you
to
can't
the
catch a break.
In the Fast Lane podcast, and I was like, no, that can't be him. Surely not.
Listen
It
to his
was-
podcast on the Gypsy Tales. You'll like him more.
I like him. I really like him. I just don't see what Joseph sees in him, to be honest. Anyway, let's not open that can of worms again.
He just sounded like you'd walk past him and he'd be like, "How you going, brah?" Like
He would.
It was that kind of
Give you the deuces.
yeah.
I don't mind. He's all right. I just think that he's just not as good as people. Man, he changed his name on the back of his leathers this year to Thriller.
Oh,
What has he done?
Anthony,
What
stop
has
looking
he
at
done?
people's
Yeah, but they were
design,
calling-
mate.
What
they were
has he
calling him
done?
Thriller- they were
What was it-
calling him
What has he
was it
done
before
to
that?
warrant the
What-
firm?
What was it before that?
Miller.
No, it wasn't.
That's his name.
It was Jackass.
It was Miller, mate.
You're talking about becoming mature. He's giving himself
Thriller.
a mature adult
He's
name.
done nothing yet to be called
Ah,
Thriller.
shut up, you
You know
flaming
what though? He
hater.
dominates the preseason dirt bike competition that they all go to. So
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
too bad you don't get any points for that. If he had a 50-point advantage by the end of it, maybe. But come on, Jackie, give
He
us
should
something.
get a 50-point advantage for being a great guy.
Give us something, Jack. Come on, mate.
So to our listeners, we are actually from Australia, not somewhere else. So
You
just
wouldn't
bear that
know
in
it,
mind.
eh?
look,
No, you
we're the
wouldn't.
local press, so we have to give him the most pressure.
Anthony's
Okay.
Anthony's bringing hard bullshit facts about him, and then the minute we bring up
Mate.
Remy, he's like, he's not gonna win.
One day
I
when
took
we
you to
get
town with my stats, mate.
Listen. I want to talk about Remy for a bit because I've
Yeah.
done a bit more number crunching, right?
All right, give us
And,
your numbers, mate.
Like I'm so happy he's champion, and really I didn't think he was going to lose it after the race before last, and he had a really good measured, just calculated race, stayed out of trouble.
Championship
but-
race. Just
Yeah,
to win the
like
championship.
very like well played, but very smart. Showed a lot of maturity.
he had a Joanne performance.
He had a Joanne Myray championship kind of run.
Johan.
However Anthony decides to say it on any given day. I'd love to see what it's going to sound like next year. Jane Mary or something. Anyway, but what I wanted to talk about was when you think about the way he's risen through the Moto2 ranks, like it hasn't been an overnight success like Fernandez this year. It's been you wouldn't call him like a
Prodigy.
protege. Yeah, a prodigy. He wouldn't be a protege. A prodigy. He definitely isn't a prodigy. So I looked through his points over the last 3 years because I wanted to see how he's matured over the last 3 seasons. So in 2019, he scored 77 points, and he scored points in 11 of the 19 rounds. And then the next year, so last year, he got 135 points, and he scored points in 11 out of the 15 rounds. So he had a 75% spike in his points over 4 races less, which was pretty impressive. And then coming into this year, I mean, the pressure's been on him this year from the start because he's come into the best team, like what is it? IO KTM they don't suffer fools, and they'll bring you in and take you out just as quickly as they bring you in, like they're a championship producing team. And from the start, he knew he only had 1 year in Moto2, and if he was good enough, he was going into MotoGP or he was done. And he's scored 311 points and scored points in 17 of the 18 races. 133% rise in points this year. What are you laughing at?
You just Nostradamus.
I'm not remembering these facts. I just told you I went and looked into it. What are you talking about? You think I'm just like going, oh yeah, if I'm like,
Going in a deep dive.
yeah. I
But
just
some good information.
I wanted to know as a rider how he's matured over the last 3 seasons, because you can see like a literally doubling of points, pretty much doubling of points over the last 3 years, and also I think more impressively limiting the non-point scoring races, because usually you don't score points if you crash,
Yeah.
especially on these good bikes. So I just thought it was for someone coming into MotoGP, because everyone's like, oh, Fernandez, and Fernandez is a beast. But I think that the maturity and the way he's gone about his craft over the last 3 years will do him well coming
I
into
think-
MotoGP.
if you were to think about his Moto2 championship season and kind of who he reminds me of, it's actually Brad Binder. He's had a very similar season to Brad Binder, and if you look at how that's left Brad Binder in the MotoGP, if KTM can get on top of that bike again, Brad Binder could be, a lot higher than he is. He's notoriously good at finishing races. The
Brad Binder
bike
came sixth in the championship this year.
bike is a dog to qualify, but he manages to get through the field. So I feel like, if that's who we're comparing him to, and I think that's a fairly good comparison considering they were on the same bikes and they're going to fairly similar teams as well.
I'll say
and
this too.
That's
While
good.
we're on the topic of
You're a bit soft.
Remy
You're a bit
Gardner.
soft.
You're a bit
While we're
soft,
on the
Nixie.
while we're
Not
on the
first time
topic
you said that.
of Remy, while we're on the talking about Remy Gardner, Pedro Acosta also won Moto3, and I know you're going to say that I'm paid by Suzuki here, but if Alex Rins was to start poorly next year, I would put my money on Suzuki reaching for Pedro Acosta because of the fact that they've done it before, and they're definitely not scared of reaching down to Moto3 for top tier talent like they did with Joan Mir. I would not be surprised if they were to go that route again. And
Pedro
stick with
Acosta
Pedro.
racing Moto2 next year. He's taken over
His
Gardner's
spot.
seat.
No, I'm saying as in for 2023. So I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if they were to if Rins was to start poorly and Pedro was to start well in Moto2, if that was their long-term strategy. I just thought I'd spit that out while I had the chance.
What do you think about Miguel Oliveira? If he has another year like he had this year, do you even see KTM keeping his services? Like when he won that race this year, or did he just come second? Did he win a race this year? He won a race this
He
year.
won a race.
Yeah,
But I think
everyone's like,
KTM
when's
gets
his...
a pass this year and their riders get
Yeah.
a pass this year. That bike has
Yeah.
been nothing to write home about. If they're going to be honest about it, they need to look at what they've given the riders, because last year he was, doing some amazing things. I think he was just pushing too hard to try to make something happen, if we're being frank, to be honest
I
with you.
think there's a bit of that, Ant. I think you called it a few pods ago when you mentioned the fact that they were given less what's the word? I think assists, leniencies this year. They lost a lot of those privileges as a developing team. I think their stable of MotoGP riders actually regressed this year as well. I mean, you had Pole, who's, like I mentioned this before, essentially developed that bike. They were in a great position last year. I think all of their riders were pretty strong. Tech 3 were really pushing the works team last year, and then Tech 3 have fallen off a cliff this year. I think the works team has been less formidable, so I would expect a big jump from KTM again as well next year. I think that'll be interesting.
Do you want to hear
They've got a great stable of riders coming through. I don't think anyone is going to cut the mustard if they're going to be middling in that stable in both camps, Tech 3 and Red Bull KTM. So be interesting to see what happens there as well.
So just give us a quick one to end up, mate. Just give us your quick stat and we'll finish on that.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Tech 3, I was crunching more numbers before as well about the percentages of points that teams have gained or lost every race this year. Tech 3 last year scored on average 10.8 points a race, right? And they weren't the best team last year, but they came 6th or 7th in the championship out of the 12, and they were pretty good. And this year they've dropped from 10.8 points a race to 4.2. They've had the biggest drop out of any team other than the Sepang Racing team. And Sepang last year came second. So Tech 3 really need to, or Tech 3 should I say, if I want to be the purist, they really need to pick up next year. And I think the riders that they've brought in are an afterthought. They're both super talented, and they've shown that they can compete at the top of a great grid. So I'm very excited to see them next year.
Massively, their riders are going to be take a quantum leap in quality. Leclerc has been abysmal. I think Petrucci was done last year. I don't even understand why they even went with him. I understand the experience argument, but I think he was done. So yeah, for sure, Gardner and co surely be better from Tech 3.
I think we'll leave it there, boys.
Yep.
That was a Tabasco Field episode 10. So it was, some good
Basco.
Tabasco Field, mate. She was
What are we
spicy.
talking about,
She
Joanne?
was spicy.
Johan.
Yep. I think we'll make Joan Arc the new patron of the podcast as well. But with all that being said, thanks so much for listening tonight, guys. Please, on our socials, give us a like, give us a follow. Keep spreading the word, keep spreading the love. And we'll have the episode 11 coming up this week as well, where we review the MotoGP, the Formula One race from Interlagos. So thanks so much, guys. Have a great night. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks,
guys.
guys.